Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 68. Today I'm speaking with Harshitha Prakash. Harshitha lives in India and has started Gida Living Colours. She uses plant and earth materials to create ink and paint, creating small-scale, sustainable art supplies that reflect the landscape from where they're sourced. Harshitha is a member of the Natural Colours Collective, a group of nature enthusiasts sharing knowledge of natural and sustainable art practices. The Natural Colours Collective have created 2 online courses where you can learn to make your own inks and paints from nature. In our conversation, Harshitha talks about the magic of creating colours with nature, how we can be more sustainability conscious in our choices when selecting art materials, and the delight she feels when sitting under a banyan tree. Let's listen. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm really excited to talk about this unique way of using nature in art. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
So the very first thing I always ask my guests is about nature in early life. And I'm wondering if nature has been part of your life from the beginning.
Yeah, during my early childhood, for a brief time, maybe in summer holidays, I had the privilege to go to my village. My dad is being born and brought up in a village in Karnataka. So I used to go there on and off, mostly during my summer holidays, live there. And the one thing that would always draw me towards going to that place was the swing. I love playing on a swing. And I used to get a chance to tie a rope to a tree, very huge tamarind tree, and then swing all day, the entire day. Only thing that I used to do was swing over there. That used to just take me to the village. I really loved going there for that. And that's been one of the best memories for me. As I grew up, that just got disconnected slightly and started living more in an urban space. But still, whenever there was time, whenever there was an opportunity to go, we always did go back to the village, live there and stay there for some time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder about nature around you now. How do you find nature? What does it look like when you're looking for nature where you live?
Right now, I live in both kind of spaces. I do live in a village where it's surrounded by just plants, trees, and I also live in an urban space just surrounded by buildings entirely. But I feel anywhere we are living, there's always something that we can observe. There's always something which we can learn. Even though I'm living in an urban space, I can very much go on a walk, go to a park, or just say a small travel from the city, and I get to see so many things to learn, or just stay on the terrace and you get to see a lot of birds. That's also nature. Or if you just have a small kitchen garden on your terrace, there is so much of activity of nature going on in just a small space, or just a small pot. We don't even need a bigger space. One pot, and you just don't do much into it, and you see so many creatures coming up over there, living over there, and it's really so amazing to observe those things and learn from it. Yeah.
And when you're in the village on the farm, what do you see there?
That's even more beautiful to say. That's a huge space, and it's always been a blessing to live there. Sometimes I feel, and especially the early mornings, I just love it. Like the sounds of birds that wake you up, and the rains, the water. I have a small lake near my farm, and it's a beautiful view. Just sit there and work And it also helps me a lot in terms of exploring a lot about colors, which I keep doing. It helps me learn about a lot of different greens or different plants. There's so diverse food that we get to eat. If staying in an urban space, we generally just buy certain things, but staying there and you learn to forage for your food, learn to forage for small things which you don't even know was edible. Learning certain things is really a wonderful thing that I get to do there. And yeah, my heart is always driven towards farming, so I like doing it and I enjoy the process of those things.
I love that you said that there's nature wherever you are, in a city, in a pot. And I think that that is really important to remember, that it doesn't have to be grand. It can be a wide open space or a farm, but it also can be with us wherever we are in cities. I think that's really beautiful to remember.
True.
So now you are, part of your work is creating colours for people to use in art and creating and teaching people how to do that. And I wonder how you came to this. How did you come to be investigating colours in nature?
I think a huge part of this process of what I'm doing goes to my mother. She's been someone who's always introduced me to art and craft since my childhood. So every summer holiday, she used to teach me every year, she used to teach me one new art or a craft to work. And the entire year I used to practice or learn it. If I'm interested, I carry forward. If I'm not interested, it's just gone. But she used to make sure that she teaches me one new craft every year, every summer holiday. And that developed that creativity or the interest towards arts and crafts in me. And there is a second thing which always interested me since childhood was magic. So when I was very young, I went to my dad and I was like, I want to learn magic. And back then there was not much of internet and stuff, but I don't know how he managed to learn. He did manage to learn few magic tricks. He taught me. And then that was from there was no stop for me to learn magic. I was always interested in learning about magics, and he bought me books and stuff, and those are the two things which are always been a fundamental interest which has been for me since my childhood. But then as I finished my schooling, as we grew, I sort of lost connect to both of those. It became more into studies and stuff. But after my education, I did enroll for a fellowship over here. So through this fellowship, I got an opportunity to go to a village, live there, explore about all possibilities that we can work. And that is when I started learning or exploring more about farming. And I met really amazing people over there who were interested in trying out natural farming, who were willing to switch from chemical-based farming methods to natural farming methods. So I also started slowly to reconnect back to nature. Also the curious kid which was there in me, which was lost slowly, and it became more ignorant, the ignorance started going away, and I started again to become more curious about nature, about things going on. So started with natural farming initially, but as I started interacting with the women and the people or the farmers over there, one day there was a lady who came to me. She bought a teak leaf and she rubbed it against her palm, and she was like, this is how we make kumkum. So kumkum is a traditional thing which we apply on our forehead in India. So she was like, this is how we make traditional kumkum. And I was so surprised that a green teak leaf just rubbing towards your palm gets a red color, bright red color.
Wow.
So this is just the thought of this was so amazing. And I used to journal my life back then in the village, and that is the time when I thought, okay, it's fine, and I'm doing everything with nature. Why am I journaling it with artificial colors. Let me start making my own colors. I mean, that one thing actually initiated me to reconsider what colors can be made. And I didn't know much back then. I just started doing very small things about just whatever is available in my kitchen. Initiated with that, but then I slowly started understanding colors. I slowly started to explore more about it, and a friend of mine introduced me to an organization here called Gandhigram, and they really taught me about how to use them in your fabrics, or how to use them in a different ways. And those when I started exploring more about colors, that interest would never fade away. There's all now that creativity and magic which was lost in the childhood again came back, is what I felt. And things just started, and yeah, I just love doing it now.
It's amazing. And so you've also gathered around you a group of people who are called the Natural Colours Collective. Can you tell me about the Natural Colours Collective?
Yeah, this is a group of people who are interested and who are working towards exploring more about natural colors, and we like to support each other and work. Natural colors, there's not just one application. It's not just about paper. It can be used on walls, it can be used on canvas, it can be used on papers, on wood. There's so many different types of application, and the group of people that we have different interests. Few are interested into doing wall paints, few are interested into doing paintings on paper, and few of them are artists and who like to try these things and explore more about natural colors. And we thought it's a nice thing if we can be supportive with each other and work. So there's anyways very little literature available with respect to the paints for our region. So we thought if we can share the knowledge with each other, it helps, and we can document all these things. It would really help us grow, and it could also create a lot of interest in everyone around us into knowing more about natural colors. So that's when we start. That's when actually the initiation was taken by my friend. Her name is called Nandita. So she was the one who initiated it, and then we all were really excited to do it. Then that's how we came up, and that's how it's been running right now. It's more of a supportive group. It's not an organization as that. Yeah.
It's so wonderful to support each other that way, and to lift each other up, and to share excitement and innovations in this field. So good. And as a group, you have put out a couple of workshops, and I've taken one of them, and I'm looking forward to taking the other one. The first one is about creating inks from plants, and it's been so wonderful and exciting to explore this. Do you want to talk a little about the workshops?
We've been doing workshops from past few years. But then after lockdown, as we saw it, we couldn't do any physical workshops, and that's when we thought, okay, let's do online workshop. And doing an online workshop used to feel like there's so many things we need an extra person all the time. And then we were like, let's record it, and it would be more useful for people because we'll be able to cover all the topics that we want to convey to the other person than in a live workshop. So that's when we took our time and recorded everything that we wanted to convey to people, and came up with these two workshops, which is a very basic workshop, but it would definitely create interest into for others to start exploring about what natural colors are. It would give a very nice start for everyone who is interested to get nature into their paintings. So that's how we started these two workshops, and we are looking forward for doing more. But yeah, I think this would be a nice start for us. It's been a nice start for us. It's also going to be a nice start for everyone who is going to try doing it. And it's very simple. It's not very complicated process.
I've been so inspired and excited about it since I watched the ink making workshop, and just the last few days I was outdoors with my son and we were talking about what could make ink, and we've done some experiments, and we made some ink from hibiscus flowers that I had in my kitchen.
Yeah, I did see your stories. That was amazing.
What I found amazing was the color change, and maybe we can talk about this too. So I don't know why, but when the hibiscus ink went onto the paper, it was bright red, and then after maybe 30 seconds it had changed to purple, and then the very next day it was almost black. It was amazing, the transformation that happened on the page.
That's actually very beautiful. I think a lot of us try to do things which are like, we want permanent things, or we want more immortal things in life, and I mean, accepting that things change, accepting the change is really needed, and not everything needs to be permanent. And this particular things from ink is so wonderful to learn about. Even though it changes, it is not a bad change. Changes are beautiful. Even though our ink is changing, it's changing to a different color. It's changing to a different hue, or it might become to a paler hue. But it's still a beautiful color to look at. But that being said, colors, natural colors are being used since ages. So there are colors which would not fade or which would not change due time. And if we really want some artwork to be preserved for a very long time, we can start using them, or you can start using earth colors, which will last for centuries, which would not fade. But just to be open to an idea about, it's okay, like however it would look like, but let's try painting it. That idea would make it more easier, and that's very beautiful to paint on a paper. And also, just one color would give you multiple colors. That change, like, is also a wonderful thing that you can try. Having just hibiscus, but you can actually, even though not waiting for next day for it to change, immediately you add certain things to that hibiscus ink, it would change. It would probably give you 3 to 4 different colors at the same time. That's something which is very beautiful, and that's very magical. That's what I was telling you about, having magic into picture. That is something which I find it extremely magical.
I love that you bring the magic part of this, because it's so magical, and it makes me smile so much that you recognize that, and that important thing, that magic in life from your childhood is here in nature, in these changes, in what you can create out of nothing. And I'm just smiling because it's so beautiful. I love that you recognize that the ephemeral nature of that things aren't permanent, and that watching the changes can be beautiful.
True.
I love that you said that. But also, that was something that astonished me in the class, was that you can deliberately add things, and depending on what you add, you will change the hue completely. That was amazing. I didn't know that. That was really fun to learn.
That was fun for me too, especially colors, like they're very pH sensitive colors, like butterfly pea flowers, or even hibiscus or turmeric. The changes are so drastic. Like turmeric with lime, it's like from yellow to red. It's a very different color, and you would be so surprised to see them changing so drastically. I really love doing those.
So it's about shifting the pH one way or the other.
Yes.
That's what makes the color change. Yeah.
So if it's more acidic, it gives you just a different color. If you're brewing it more alkaline, it gives you a different color. You're keeping it neutral, it gives you a different color.
It's so exciting. I'm wondering about, because I'm finding this inside myself now, that when I look outside at nature, I'm scanning and I'm wondering, what color would that make? And I'm wondering if you do that too.
I do that a lot.
Looking for it.
When people go on a walk with me, I think they also start doing that, because I think I would just keep asking people to find things which would, like, if you know something that would give you colors, or if you know something which is something which can be used. I think I'm also interested in edible things, so something
Yes.
to eat or something to color, I'm always interested. And whenever I go on a walk, I'm constantly looking on the ground or around me and trying to figure out, see, what is it? I want to identify some things like that. And best thing that I've identified till now, I think that's the Dyer's oleander plant, which was just in front of my house for a year, and I didn't recognize it's a dying plant. And one fine day, the flowers were so beautifully smelling, and I was like, let me know more about it. And I tried to figure out what it is. Then I realized it's a Dyer's oleander plant. So that one leaf can give you yellow, that leaf gives you blue, it gives you green, it gives you browns. And I was so surprised that one leaf can give you so many different colors. Very similarly, on all my walks, I really like to look for colors or look for things which are like, I mean, more like colors, it also like to understand the behavior of the plants. I would like to know what they are, or what they like, or how it behaves, how it changes. I think that creates, that curiosity for me is more interesting.
Yeah, you get connected with the plant, right?
Yeah.
Just by you come to know it. You want to know more and more, and you feel connected with that particular plant when you're investigating it.
And knowing that behavior of each and every plant, right, it connects you more towards that plant, and it makes you understand more about it. I think that's more wonderful, to get connected in a way where you're understanding about their behaviors.
I love in the class that you can use the leaves or the flowers, the root, depending on the plant, depending on the growing pattern of the plant, that what you want to look for and what's going to be useful for making ink. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Actually, you can use all parts of the plant in general, but a certain part of a plant will give you something that you expect probably from the plant, the color that we expect from the plant. A certain part would give that, but each and every part of the particular plant would give you some or the other color. They would have some or the other pigments in it for sure. But the expected, or what we're looking for, comes from one part of it, which we may have to explore that by doing some trial and errors.
Yes, I was going to ask, did you learn a lot just from experiments? Because you must have got some knowledge, but you get a lot of knowledge just by doing and practicing and trying and failing and trying again, right?
A lot of things did happen to me, like trial and errors, but also, as I said, I learned few things in an organization called Gandhigram. That was the start for me to explore colors more in depth into all the colors that I used to make before were not light fast. But after the class, I started learning more about what are the colors which would stay, what are the colors which would change. So that gave me a very basic understanding of how to look for colors and where to start looking for colors. But the later part for making paints, it all came from trial and errors. So there's a lot of changes. A particular plant, depending on the temperature, it changes. Depending on the pH, it changes. Depending on time, it changes. So there's so many variations, and it's very interesting to figure out a correct place or correct recipe, or that's the reason where I was telling you it's really important to understand the behavior of the plant. So there's a plant, the Dyer's oleander, what I was telling you. If you are heating at a certain temperature, it gives you blue. You're increasing that temperature, it gives you green. And you boil it more, it gives you yellows. So for us to understand what pigments they contain, how do you extract that, those all comes basically from trial and errors. But there are certain books which I like to refer, but again, the literature is very limited to fabrics and not to paints. But still, I think it's a nice start for us to understand trial and errors actually work, and it's something which is interesting to do. So that's how it all works for me as well. A lot of experimentations.
And it's so much fun to do that as well.
Exactly.
Tell me about the beautiful little paint sets that you put together and sell.
Uh, those are basically earth pigments. So for everyone who wants that, doesn't want their paintings to change, who want their paintings to last forever, I think those are the colors which people can use. Because they're again from soil. Soil pigments generally don't fade or they don't change over time. And I really like working with soils. So extracting clays from different soils or rocks, and then making paints out of it. My region has good color. We, like in India, we have very limited colored soils. It's majorly whites, reds, and yellows. We can't find much of greens and blues. But the type of browns and yellows that we find are very different hues of browns, very different hues of yellows. They're very nice, and also whites. So those are the colors which I forage for around the regions, and then convert them into watercolors. Yeah.
I wonder for you what it's like to take the earth from a place that is really significant and then create paint with it. There's something very moving, I think, to use the earth from somewhere that has a memory for you or a place where you've had good experiences, and then to turn that into paint. How does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, so the entire set that I curated, those are the soils which we have foraged for, and I know where it's coming from, and that idea itself makes me feel nice. There's also one part of me which keeps questioning me about how ethical it is to collect soils, because they're not something which would replenish very faster like how we do it for plants. So that's also a reason why the colors that we make are in very small numbers. It's not in huge quantities. It's not bulk produced. It's in very small numbers, and that's the main reason why it's made in small numbers. But at the same time, it also makes me happy that I know where I'm collecting it from, and I'm not collecting huge quantities of it. And the colors that we are turning it into is going to become beautiful art pieces, and it's going to bring smile to someone saying, yeah, I've tried to do it using a soil or using a earth pigment. That idea makes it more satisfying. There's both these devil and angel things going on in my head sometimes when I collect it. I think I try to find a balance at times with that.
Yeah, that's very respectful. But you've really made me think about the art products that I use, because I do nature journaling and I use paints from the art store, and I haven't really thought deeply about what that means, where that comes from, what processes go into it, what things that are questionable, things that I wouldn't find very nice go into these art supplies that I'm using. So you've really made me think about that over this last week.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I like doing natural colors, I also would try to appreciate the fact that because of the chemical dyes which had come up a few centuries ago, there's a privilege of each and every person being able to use colors. Now it's not limited to just artists. Literally anyone are using colors. They're able to enjoy the colors and things. And if it had become more about only soil colors, I think the scale which people are using these days, that wouldn't have happened. But again, that being said, it's also using just natural colors and not being too much addicted towards the hues or colors which a particular paints would give. I think that makes you more connected towards nature and natural colors. And instead of purchasing colors with like any chemical colors, if we can also just paint thinking in mind about the nature around us and just try to imitate that and create your own colors from whatever small resources is available around you and start making colors. That would also be a best thing. Basically, because when I'm talking, like I was talking about the scale which the chemical dyes or chemical colors I bought, that scale wouldn't have been possible just with natural colors and natural hues.
Yes.
But at the same time, instead of one thing that we can tweak that or we can change that would be by doing it by ourselves, trying to change our thought process slightly and be open towards the colors that nature is giving you around you. Or maybe again, like I said, it's just a pot, just plant a couple of seeds in your pot and see what colors it's giving you, instead of purchasing chemical paint. Or you can plant a couple of flowers or a couple of things in your small garden or something like that, and try to paint them. So in that way you are also able to create the art that you're creating, and you can be mindful, you can be happy with what's happening.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's always good for us to reflect on what we're using, because it's so easy to just say, oh, that looks good, oh, that looks good, that looks good, and not reflect on it. So anytime that we can reflect on what we're purchasing, what we're using, that's going to be beneficial, and we can make better choices, because there are some, especially watercolors, that are better or worse than others. And just even having this train of thought, even having this moment of reflection is good, I think.
Yeah, it's just good to ask yourself about how important that is for you to create a art that we're doing. Can we shift it with something that is more earth friendly? It is more, do we have that option to have an alternative? And if the answer is yes, always go for the second thing and try create it.
Yes, and I love that you actually create your own natural brushes that you find in various things. I've seen including grass and cow hairs and even dog hairs, and I think this is so amazing, and I'd love for you to talk about that, creating your own brushes.
Yeah, I love the textures that different brushes provide me. It may not, sometimes the brushes may not feel as flexible as the ones that we purchase, but there are, when you are using sheep hair or cow hair, the textures are amazing, the usability of the brushes are equally good, especially with grass and stuff. It's the different types of lines. I mean, I think a lot of people these days use their iPads or some other tools for creating artworks, and there are different types of brushes available and people use it.
Yes.
And this for me feels very similar, where I have different textured brushes and I dip it in different things and I can paint different textured colors, and that's more interesting for me as such. And I also like going to an animal and petting it for some time and just take the hair from it.
I love that.
And dog hair never worked. It's always very super soft, but the sheep hair and the cow hair is really nice. And especially it's always good to take calf hair and baby sheep hair, because they're tender hairs and they're really soft. It's just nice to do.
So sweet. Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. You had one post on Instagram and it was beautiful, and it said, if I can I'll quote you, it said, "There's nothing more comforting than sitting under a banyan tree and painting a banyan tree using banyan brushes." And I would love for you to tell me about that feeling, about painting the landscape with the landscape, in fact, in the soil paints that you use, using materials that you harvested from the landscape. What does that feel like?
Banyan tree has been one of my favorite trees ever, and I love spending my time under a banyan tree and on it in general. I love sitting around the banyan trees. So when I'm able to use brushes from the same part, it just feels so fulfilling for me, and it makes me so happy that I can actually be using them as the process of what I'm creating. Um, it's more like it gives me a lot of fulfillment, or it gives me more of happiness. And the idea of banyan tree itself has been a very happy thing for me since a very long time. I always love to sit under a banyan tree or play around a banyan tree for some weird reason. I have no.
Is it a tree from your younger days, or what is it that's so
I think I like
important to that?
the swinging part of it because the roots come over. And I've always tied them up and always swing on it. I think that could be one reason, but I'm not completely sure why I love them so much.
I love that you mentioned swinging, because I loved swinging when I was a girl as well, and I used to do that so much. And just hearing you talk about it brings back those feelings and those memories of swinging for hours
so
and
always
hours.
whenever there are big roots, you just tie them across and then you sit and swing on the banyan tree. And banyan trees are so huge, and it feels like home when you're sitting on it. And the trunk, the branches are so big, you can very comfortably sit and sleep on it. So I think that those things make me fall in love with banyan trees. And that day I was thinking I would paint banyan tree, and then I plucked a root from the tree and then made a brush out of it. I was really happy painting that. It just feels complete.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about the sustainability of all our choices that we make as artists, I'm thinking about invasive species and about how it would be possible to make inks or paints from invasive species, and how that would be a way around the moral issue of whether this is something to do that's sustainable, but that might be a way of doing both things, creating art materials and at the same time removing invasive species.
I personally love working with. I want to invest my time a lot working with such species. And personally, being a farmer, I really can relate to the issues the invasive species are giving us in terms of planting anything that we are growing in the farm. And there are a good number of such species which are very good for dyes and inks. And that's definitely a part where I would like to invest myself more and create more inks and colors from them. But the issues that they create are the flora and fauna diversity, which it reduces because the number of such plants are more, it's too huge.
Yes.
And I personally would love to invest my time into working more towards on such species. And I'm doing it to a certain extent, but I think it still needs a lot of research in that field.
I'm thinking about all the different invasive species that we have around here. Just anywhere I think that there's been fragmentation of the land and intervention, there's going to be invasive species. There's plenty of invasives around here, and I'm thinking now, my brain is thinking, how can I make ink from these plants?
I mean, we can definitely make ink from any plant that we look around. But again, if we have to get rid of a certain plant, or if you have to value add it, the intention again goes behind. Is it going to last, or is it going to be easy to do it? All those aspects also come into picture. But at the same time, if we are able to figure out a particular way for converting them, I think that would be a added plus point towards that.
You mentioned about pre-COVID doing workshops in the community, and I'm really interested to talk about that, what it's like to go into these places and show people that they can make art materials from the plants around them and the soil.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite
Yeah.
things
Tell me
to
about
do
that.
as well. That's one of my favorite also because you get to like go around the location with the team or with the kids, and then the type of things that they collect and come back are so interesting. You wouldn't sometimes think you can make colors out of a certain ingredient what they collect and come, and that exploration, that experience, especially kids when they're looking around and something they find it, and we end up experimenting with the kids to see, is it going to give you color, is it not going to give you color. I think that feel and that process is something really interesting for me, especially with working with them and trying to, it gives me also an idea about, okay fine, is there a different possibility of doing certain things, or is there a different plant which we can work around and see if there is there are different colors which we can extract from it. I think in the experimentation and the research process this also helps a lot, because as kids they're so curious and they're so energetic. The type of items they pick when they're on a walk are so different, and that's something which that's the main reason I love actually doing workshops. I like hands-on workshops. So it's, the process is very creative in that aspect than in online space where we just use certain ingredients.
Yes, and I love that you have the component where you are going out with them and actually foraging for the materials, bringing it back, having that experimental phase where is this going to work? Is it not going to work? And then actually putting that on paper and creating art with it. It's just so joyful. I just love it.
Yeah, and it's also interesting for kids in that way, because when they've collected something from a space and they come over and they're able to see that has been turning into an art, and they're able to create some colors out of it from anything that they have collected it from. That happiness you see in their faces also creates a lot of happiness and fulfillment for you.
Yes, you're teaching people that nature is fascinating. Nature is this resource that we can harness to be creative, bring art into our lives, and that you've done it to me. You've done it to me, because my eyes are seeing things I hadn't seen before, just because I'm looking out for what can we create next? What can we create next? It's very joyful.
It is, for sure. And it's also equally important to be mindful about the items that we forage for, and not collect for the reason that there is abundance of it around. Collect how much you require for a certain process. One of the aspects which I really try to tell kids when they're foraging for different items is that part where collect how much you need, not just because you can see so many flowers on a tree doesn't mean you pick up a lot of it and end up throwing it. Just collect what is required for you. That's something I think it's really important for any of us who are trying to forage for things.
Yeah, that's really important. Thank you for restating that, because that's something to keep in mind every time we go out. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and your joys with me today. It's been so fun to talk to you. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. And I think this is my first podcast, and it's been really nice talking to you and sharing. And it also brought back my childhood memories and stuff. It was amazing talking to you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Harshitha. I love how this conversation made me reflect on my own choices of art supplies. When it comes to paint, I'll admit that I have never really given it a whole lot of thought. I usually go into the art store and find what looks good and find the colours I want, usually from well-known brands like Winsor & Newton or Daniel Smith, and I've never really given much thought to where the colours come from or how they're made. I have modified my colour choices a little to avoid some of the colours that are considered somewhat toxic, like cobalt blue and the cadmium family, but apart from that, I haven't thought much about it. This conversation with Harshitha made me want to investigate more and research the source of the paints I buy. Everything we buy has an entire life cycle that needs to be considered, from the sourcing of raw materials, processing, what chemicals are involved, the ethics and sustainability of what goes in at each stage, even the working conditions of the people who physically make the products. There's a lot to think about that I haven't been thinking about until now, so I'm really grateful for this conversation. One way to feel confident about what we're buying is to buy from small suppliers and family-run businesses. Whether it's purchasing paints created by Harshitha herself or another small business, you're able to ask questions and to find out how the products are sourced and created and what goes into the process at every stage. I hope this episode sparked you to think about your own art supplies and how they're created. If you'd like to learn more about Harshitha, you can visit the show notes for this episode and find a link to her Instagram profile, and you can also find a link to the Natural Colours Collective. Definitely consider taking their online courses if you'd like to learn how to create your own inks and paints from nature around you. It's such a fun thing to do. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.